Hey guys, okay, so this is the chapter 5 video lecture for our informative speaking module. We're going to talk a little bit about nonverbal messages. This is going to be a short lecture because I know you guys have a lot this week with doing your informative speeches and doing your research for those. So I kind of wanted to keep it a little bit concise. So nonverbal communication are the messages that we send that transcend the spoken word. It consists of nonverbal messages, which are cues we send with our body, our voice, the amount of space we have between people, whether or not we're on time, and our general appearance. And these messages can modify, contradict, replace, or support verbal messages. So they can make a verbal message stronger, or you can say the opposite of it. So say you're with your partner says I love you, but they're looking at their phone and they seem angry and there's like this scary look in their eyes. Well, you probably won't believe that I love you. It might even seem threatening in that context. That might be a situation in which a nonverbal message contradicts a verbal message. So some characteristics of nonverbal communication are that it's inevitable, meaning it exists whether we like it or not, or whether we intend for it to be there or not. Nonverbal communication is the primary conveyor of emotion. So we interpret nonverbal communication as actually more important than the words that are spoken, than verbal communication. It's multi-channeled, meaning it comes from more than one source. So you might see facial expressions, you might see gestures with your hands. It's also ambiguous, meaning it's subject to interpretation. So some types of nonverbal communication include kinesthetics, which is body, paralanguage, which is voice, proxemics, which relates to space, chronemics, which relates to time, and appearance, which doesn't actually have a scientific name, but it relates to dress and grooming. Kinesthetics is body. It's what we do with our body. So one type is gestures. So these are movements of the hands, arms, and fingers. So some types of gestures are illustrators, which are gestures that clarify a verbal message. So this would be if you were wanting someone to look at something else and you pointed, that would be an illustrator. Emblems might be gestures that replace words. I can think of one particular example that many people use while driving to express anger, where instead of saying certain words, some profane words that I can't say in this PowerPoint, they might use a gesture with certain fingers. And adapters are unconscious responses to needs, things like adjusting your glasses or scratching an itch. So another part of body language, kinesthetics, is eye contact and facial expression. Eye contact is how much we look at others during communicating. Appropriate levels of eye contact do vary across cultures, but Americans interpret eye contact as sincerity, and it's an important part of our culture. Facial expressions are using facial muscles to convey emotions. Facial expressions are normally interpreted the same way across multiple cultures, and they're not really something that we control. We can, but we don't tend to control them as much as we do things like eye contact and gestures. Posture is how we position and move our body. Body orientation is how we position our body in relation to other people. So let's say you're talking with someone that you really like. You're probably going to get closer to them, or maybe you're going to turn your body toward them to show that you're listening. Similarly, if you're talking to someone that you don't really like and you just want to get out of there, you might subconsciously turn your body away from them to try to get away. That would be body orientation. And body movement is changing body position. It's moving the body in any way. Paralanguage is the use of voice, and it consists of several sort of subcategories. Pitch is the highness or lowness of one's voice. Volume is the loudness or softness of voice. Rate is the speed at which you're speaking. Quality or timbre is the sound of a person's voice that distinguishes it from others. It is a little harder to describe. Intonation is the variety and inflections in voice. And localized pauses are things like extra sounds or words that interrupt fluent speech, like, okay. And you've, I'm sure, heard me use them in presentations before, and I've heard many of you use them in speeches as well. They're just they are a part of how we individually speak, but during a speech, there's something that we kind of want to cut down on. So some other types of nonverbal communication include space, so the distance between you and another person. This often indicates how comfortable you are with them. So if you tend to, pre-COVID, if you tend to stand, 6 feet away from someone, that's a lot of space in between them. That's showing that it's not a very intimate relationship. It's probably much more professional, or you're not fond of each other. Two people who tend to be very close in proximity tend to be closer. Time also is a type of nonverbal communication. So if you're late, if you're consistently late, then that sends a message. If you're consistently early, that shows that being there is important. And physical appearance, how we look to others or how we represent ourselves through our appearance, also sends certain messages. So if you're dressed professionally, then you're going to be seen as more reliable than someone who maybe is not dressed as professionally. So to improve nonverbal communication, you can both send and interpret messages. So when you're sending, you may want to monitor your nonverbal messages and adapt them to the situation. It can be helpful to intentionally align your nonverbal messages with your purpose, so to kind of pay attention to what your face is doing and what your hands are doing. If you want to convey, say you're in a job interview and you want to seem like you like the person, you might try to orient your body toward them more to convey that you're listening, you're interested in what they're saying, whether you actually are or not. It can be helpful to reduce distracting nonverbal messages. This is particularly the case with adapters. So if you're constantly shuffling a change in your pocket, then that might be distracting to someone else, and so it might send the wrong message, so you may want to cut down on that. When it comes to interpreting nonverbal communication, it's helpful to remember that the same nonverbal message can mean different things to different people. Eye contact is a good example. In some cultures, it's considered rude to maintain eye contact. That's not the case here in America, so having some kind of cultural awareness of body language can be very helpful. Consider nonverbal messages in the context of the conversation in which they occur and in the context of what's going on in the person's life. So if you're talking to someone and they start kind of turning away from you and getting ready to leave, but they're late for work, well, that probably has nothing to do with you. They're probably just stressed about being late for work. And pay attention to multiple nonverbal messages and relate them to the verbal message. So you're going to get many nonverbal messages in any given conversation, and it can be helpful to kind of see how they reinforce the verbal message or contradict it. The more of those there are on one end or the other, the more likely you are to be able to accurately interpret what's going on. And we've talked about before, but use perception checking to make sure that the way you're perceiving things is as close to accurate as is possible. So that's it for this presentation. There'll be one more in a few minutes, and I'll talk to you guys soon.